I don't like being put in a situation where I have to defend you. I'm just gonna keep it 100. But Dave Rubin went on a show.
Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the
All right, so recently in the flurry of allegations and controversy surrounding Hasan Piker, ridiculous claims being made, all kinds of smear attempts, Dave Rubin has popped up, last week this happened, to accuse Hasan Piker of harassment on Ana Kasparian's behalf, which is just a bizarre thing to do. He's doing this because they all used to work at TYT together. Some people forget that, but Dave Rubin came from TYT originally. He is now a right-wing grifter who did an appearance on Jubilee recently, which went terribly for him. I covered that in a live stream if you're interested in watching that. But this is one of the most soulless and brainless grifters that we have on the right, who for some reason thought that it would work for him to lodge this accusation against Hasan. It's just kind of bizarre. So here's the clip of the podcast where he's doing that.
Studio in the office with them when they brought in Hasan, and he was awful. Everyone there. He harassed every girl there, constantly talking about his genitals. He was just awful. They basically made him work from home because he was harassing all the girls and wouldn't stop, including Anna. She'll never admit that now. I don't even care about any of that stuff other than to answer your question. These are terrible people. They are terrible people with terrible ideas. He is as privileged as it gets, comes from money, Nepo baby who got a job at the Young Turks and surpassed many people that wanted to be on camera the day he got there because his uncle is jank. And now ushers, and he's a LARPing communist. Well, I think he's worth $12 million or something.
Right.
And, he's going to Cuba and doing this communism safari while these people starve, fights for all the wrong things. He's 100% a Hamas supporter. I mean, he has said that. He has excused violence of his political opponents. He went out of his way to say he understands why Luigi Mangione killed Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. He implied the same thing about the last guy that tried to kill Trump.
Then immediately after this clip was posted onto Twitter, which is clear bait, this guy, who even knows who the fuck this guy is, whose podcast this is, but Dave Rubin went on there. Obviously, they're just trying to use this clip as a way to get some attention, but it seems to have backfired because Ana Kasparian immediately came out and said that this is a lie, that this never happened. I don't know if Dave thought maybe she wouldn't, maybe because Ana Kasparian doesn't like Hasan that much because she's kind of a right-wing grifter now herself. She just recently did an interview with Candace Owens, which I haven't even got around to watching it. Maybe I'll cover it at some point. Probably not. So maybe he assumed that she wouldn't say anything about this or would just kind of let it fly, but she didn't. She came out and corrected him because she correctly recognizes this as a part of the greater pro-Israel, pro-Zionist smear. But I do want to also emphasize that this is an interesting moment because Ana Kasparian, not that long ago, after emphasizing the fact that Dave Rubin was a right-wing grifter, complete liar for years, obviously somebody who was just doing the left grift because it's a way to reach a new audience and kind of revive your career. She'd been pretty consistent about that and then recently said on Piers Morgan that she thinks she was wrong about Dave Rubin. So here's that clip real quick.
In fact, Dave Rubin's a great example of that. Dave Rubin used to work with us. He identified as someone on the left.
Dave,
yeah, go ahead.
Forgive me, Anna. Dave Rubin made a video for PragerU, Why I Left the Left.
Oh, I know.
He does not, in fact, state to the world that he's still on the left. I don't know who you have in mind, so I can only address the one name that you gave.
So, I mean, have you pulled a Rubin, as some people suggest?
I mean, I'm still pretty left-wing, and I'm still working at the exact same place. Look, I don't know. Maybe I was wrong about Dave Rubin, but I just felt that he, first of all, after he left TYT, he did lie about us, and that bothered me because we were still friends, and I didn't understand what was going on.
But now I guess because of the issue of Israel, we are back to Dave Rubin as a grifter and a liar. Which is fine with me. He is, in fact, a Zionist, turbo Zionist Israel supporter, as blind in his support for Israel as he is every right-wing position. So here is Ana Kasparian and Hasan Piker talking about that. Hasan Piker went on the TYT broadcast, as well as having them on his Twitch stream, and they briefly addressed the Dave Rubin accusation. So here's that.
I don't like being put in a situation where I have to defend you. I'm just going to keep it 100. But Dave Rubin went on a show and claimed that you harassed me and other women at work, which was a brazen lie. I went out and said that it was a brazen lie. You never once harassed me at work. What do you think this is about? And why do you think it's okay, or why do they think it's okay to just make up lies about you like that? I mean, like, sexual harassment is a serious allegation. And for Dave Rubin, who I haven't spoken to in over a decade, to speak on my behalf like that and make something up is insane.
Yeah, I think it's a campaign of misinformation and smearing prominent critics of Israel, no matter which way they can. And it's very obvious that they're getting increasingly more desperate. Now, with Dave Rubin, it's a unique predicament because on the one hand, I'm thinking like, is this a part of a broader sophisticated smear campaign? Or rather, is it simply just Dave Rubin being stupid? Because he's just so unbelievably stupid. So with Dave Rubin, you got to think about both.
Yeah,
of
so
the
Dave
options.
Rubin, in more ways than one, is pretty much just a propped up media shill. He will say things because it's profitable to say them, because there's somebody who will pay him to say it. He's one of the people who was implicated in the Tenet media scheme, which was essentially people accepting money from what they supposedly didn't know was the Russian government as a front who was trying to prop up right-wing content creators. So all of them can get out of that by saying, well, I didn't know, and I was just taking money to do this show with Tenet Media. But ultimately, the reason all of them, like Tim Pool and Lauren Southern, were other people involved in this, the reason that they were selected is because they're conservatives who push reactionary propaganda. So while Ana Kasparian seems to have become more interested in that market, frankly, over the last couple of years, and that's evidenced by the fact that she appeared with Candace Owens, has gone on shows like Tucker Carlson, etc., and seems to just be digging further into kind of a reactionary style of rhetoric. Again, can't even bring herself here to defend Hasan Piker without caveating it, even though really they fall in the same position on Israel. And that's why they had this show together, and I'm glad they did it. This is about the fact that Hasan and Cenk Uygur have both been banned from the UK because of their statements on Israel. This was something that happened last minute before they were both supposed to appear at South by Southwest and do some talks. So already this is backfiring. This was a decision made by the UK government, and then South by Southwest kind of quickly threw them under the bus and said, we don't want to have any incident or anything like that. Very, very cowardly. And they're already facing a lot of pushback for this. It was the wrong move. Definitely, I don't know if they thought this was going to go as smoothly as when they banned Kanye from appearing, but it's the exact same thing that happened. This kind of swift revoking of someone's ability to enter the country. To be clear, I think in the case of Kanye, that was the right move. Kanye is a Hitler supporter and someone who is actively propping up Nazism in very, very explicit terms. So to say that that's somebody who has potential to cause some kind of public disturbance or something like that, I think that's fair. I think that there is a red line there. Anti-Zionism is on the other side of that red line. And so I think that eventually that will be clear. So here is him discussing with them what he thinks happens from here in terms of like these tensions over Zionism and anti-Zionism and how it gets resolved.
There's only two options out of this, obviously. It's either de-escalation on behalf of the British government, on behalf of the American government. And we have seen some de-escalation on other issues from the American government, like in Minneapolis, where there was far too much public pressure through these people-backed campaigns of people going out and protesting against ICE activity. It was an occupation by the Trump administration, and there was some success there. So even the most powerful country on earth, the United States of America, was able to cave and capitulate to the demands by the public when it got far too heated, I guess. And of course, they ended up assassinating 2 American citizens in broad daylight in the process. I guess a similar thing could take place in the UK with this issue as long as the protests continue, because like I said, at the end of the day, they have to make a decision. Are they going to allow fascism to manifest, or are they going to maintain the pretense that democracy and the democratic process still works? Because it's gotten to a degree where the overwhelming majorities of masses in almost all of the Western countries have realized what's going on, and they can't really arrest every single person, right? So they might have the moneyed interests. They might have a pervasive, sophisticated influence peddling operation that they've utilized for decades. But we have the people.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely right. I think that the resistance to this is going to be different than on other issues where they can kind of do this type of repression and get away with it, or, you know, target somebody small enough that it's able to go out without a ripple. I don't know if the calculation when it comes to Hasan Piker is that they want to make the ripples, and as he says, they want to make an example, which I think is part of the calculation. But I also don't know that they would or should be doing this if they knew the level of pushback that it's going to lead to, the ripple effect that it's going to have. And I think it's partially an effect of people who are in this, you know, rabid Zionist camp, who are the ones who would be pushing at a high level for somebody like Hasan to not be able to enter the UK. These are people who believe so strongly that if they just assert that worldview and assert that sort of framework of what type of speech is allowed, that people will go along with it. They don't really have a sense of how vast the descent towards this type of politics is, but they do know that voices like Hasan and even Cenk Uygur to an extent, and the Young Turks, only make that rhetoric more popular. I think it's their assessment that left media and independent media is vulnerable enough that they can target somebody from there and they won't really have a system of support behind them. But we're seeing that that's not necessarily true. I think it's true at some levels of independent media. But, you know, the type of audience that somebody like Hasan Piker has, or even TYT, despite the fact that they've lost credibility with, you know, most of their progressive base, they still have a pretty strong built-in audience over the years. And it's just a mistake to go after them in this way. So this type of stuff, while I'm sure it's nerve-wracking and upsetting for them, it doesn't worry me too much because I think the pushback will be too palpable. I also think that they're simply doing this as a way to try to put a lid on whatever they feel like, you know, might be a tense or lead to pushback from, you know, the more establishment Zionist sources. And they feel like it'll just blow over. At some point, they can just reverse this decision and go back to normal. And they feel like there won't be consequences for having done this. So I feel like that is an important aspect of this, that there needs to be pushback to the extent that it's really addressed, that, you know, clamping down on someone's free speech in the name of Zionism like this is just something that has to be excised from Western society. It can't continue. It is incompatible with any type of freedom, even the lesser recognized version of free speech that exists in the UK. Even still, this is an infringement upon that. So on a similar note, here is them discussing recently a parade that happened in New York where Bezalel Smotrich, a member of the cabinet in Israel, appeared. So here's them talking about that.
There were a lot of statements that came in the aftermath of the news articles that came out about Bezalel Smotrich being at the Israel parade. And some people were trying to say, oh, he snuck in. Or some people were claiming that, like, no one knew he was going to be there. And it's like, it's the Israel parade. If you go to the Klan march, you're going to have the Grand Wizard of the KKK at the Klan march. You can't turn around and be shocked and act all surprised that you know, a member of the Israeli cabinet, the finance minister of the nation state that you're choosing to celebrate, appear at the actual celebration. Of course he's going to be there, right?
So this is one of the top warmongers and war criminal of the Israeli government. One of the worst there is, like one of the most bloodthirsty representatives of Zionism and the murderous intent of Zionism at this Israel Day parade that had people like Chuck Schumer and Jessica Tisch, the police commissioner of New York. You have this war criminal, international war criminal, appearing to have the support of the police by way of Jessica Tisch being there and his ability to be there in the first place. So this is the main thing that Zohran has been getting hammered on, Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, is over his seeming capitulation on some of these issues to the NYPD. And the position that he's in with that is, you know, he has to maintain credibility with them, and essentially leaving on Jessica Tisch was a way to do that, not only with the police department itself, but with the broader sort of institutional forces that would have been upset and would have started to work against him more so if he had, say, gotten rid of Jessica Tisch. But this is the result of the decision to keep her on and to not try to make some serious reformation of the NYPD, which Zohran made clear from early on was not his goal. And there was always this lingering question of what would Zoran do if somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu came to New York on his watch after previously having said that he should be arrested if he comes to New York, Netanyahu specifically, and he should. And I think this is a test case for this. I think the fact that this happened, and there's relatively little pushback, there's some from the left, but you're not really seeing that much talk about it. I think this shows that it's probably inevitable that Netanyahu is going to try to make an appearance in New York, and that will directly be an affront to Zoran Mamdani. And so what you see here is an interesting example of the relationship between local governments and the police, and how that can sometimes go beyond whatever the agenda or the politics of like the executive or the mayor is. These police have a certain amount of entrenched power within their own unions and within their own ranks that can make it difficult for somebody like Mamdani to come in and say, we're not going to host Smotrich and, he should be arrested, or he at least should not be hosted at a parade like this. It's clear that he does not have the political capital with NYPD to make that declaration, which is a serious problem. And another place where you see a similar dynamic to this is in Newark, New Jersey, where you have this dispute over Delaney Hall. So this is a long-standing facility that is contracted, privately owned facility that has been being used by ICE to house an increasing amount of immigrants. So as they've increased the amount of people being detained there, some of the inmates have started a hunger strike with a certain set of demands to essentially let certain people out, elderly people out, sick people out, and saying that the conditions of this facility are getting worse and worse, and that some of the pressure needs to be alleviated by letting some people go free. And so this is leading to a lot of unrest outside, which is not just being challenged by ICE and the federal government, even though the federal government is the one that's in control of this facility currently. But what you're seeing is a lot of pushback from the police. The local police are essentially protecting ICE in a way that's rather controversial for them to do. But what you see is a level of cooperation and a level of repression happening surrounding Delaney Hall that is different than you've gotten in some of these other states, where the local government, the governor and the mayor has said, hey, look, we're not gonna help with this because it makes us look like shit with our own people. This is very unpopular. So in Newark, they're taking a different tack, and the governor of New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, she's relatively new. She got sworn in January, and she seems to be fully signing off on the use of police force against these protesters, which has been pretty draconian. A lot of the usual stuff, starting fights with the protesters. They detained a bunch of people for many hours and then released today. And I'm sure that more of the protests are going on tonight and will continue into the morning, potentially with some more arrests. But because the local police is on this, a lot of the protests is effectively being pushed back, designated free speech zones and other methods of repression. And so that type of coordination with Democrat-run states and cities, is exactly what causes people on the ground to say there's functionally no difference between these Democrats and Republicans that, were on the ballot as well. And the reason is because there's a couple reasons. First of all, they have these financial interests tied up in these facilities, and certain communities depend on these type of, essentially free labor camps or concentration camps to, they bring money into these communities. And that's why companies like Core Civic and GEO Group are able to essentially construct these concentration camps on behalf of ICE. And so there's a certain amount of financial interest that any corporate Democrat especially is going to be under to not undermine that, as well as not wanting to be seen by the federal government as opposing ICE or whatever, which the truth is she could do, and they could do. The state of New Jersey could absolutely be opposing ICE in this instance because the public would be behind them. In the case of Minnesota, that worked. But Mikey Sherrill doesn't want to do that. She would rather try to repress these protests and hope it goes away, which it won't. And it's just going to end up hurting her reputation significantly as a Democrat. And I think even the rank and file liberal Democrats are going to become increasingly frustrated with Democrat representatives that are capitulating to ICE. What that does is it opens the door to remind people that the type of rhetoric you get, the standard Democratic rhetoric that you get that, people like Spanberger in Virginia or Mikey Sherrill use to get into office is not necessarily enough to protect you from these fascists. And if you want elected representatives that are actually going to do something, you need to elect somebody that's speaking more combatively, not just from a political partisan perspective, but from a class-oriented perspective and from an anti-Zionist perspective and from a principled perspective. That's the only type of leadership that is actually going to be useful to us when it comes to trying to dismantle these ICE concentration camps and even just responding to the basic demands of people inside. It's also worth it to remember that this hunger strike that's happening inside of Delaney Hall is some of the most effective methods we've seen of bringing attention to this cause. Shouldn't take that in order for people to care, but there's no doubt that it has been effective in this instance. And so I think that's important for people to remember going forward as these type of things escalate.